What's good, everybody? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Over Quota. Please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review if you haven't already. Tell your friends, tell your colleagues, tell everybody. I want to grow this podcast. My goal is to give listeners a variety of perspectives and insight from sales leaders who have a proven track record of exceeding expectations for themselves and or their teams. Realizing, of course, that not one person has all the answers, because I wouldn't want to put that much pressure on anyone, including my next guest. As always, the J. David Group, my company, is sponsoring this podcast. My company helps high-growth software companies recruit top software sales leaders and salespeople. To learn more, go to thejdavidgroup.com/hiring or go to thejdavidgroup.com/looking if you're looking for your next big challenge. Now, my guest today is Colleen Manning. She's the Vice President of Sales at Clora, which is an intelligent platform that efficiently matches life science companies with flexible on-demand expertise. Colleen, welcome to Over Quota.
Hey, Jay. How's it going?
I'm doing well. Thanks for joining me.
Good. Yeah, thanks for having me.
So let's just start, actually, before we even get into Clora, give me a little bit about your backstory, because I found it interesting. I know other people have found it interesting, and I think my listeners will too as well. So just walk me up how you got started in management, really, and where that came from.
Yeah, where to start? I don't know. I mean, going back to being 3 years old, I guess, and my mom being afraid to put me in kindergarten, saying I was going to lead the whole class around. So I feel like it's kind of something that has just always been a part of my breed or whatever. But no, I mean, in all seriousness, in every aspect of my professional career so far, I've been in some sort of management capacity, and it's always something I've enjoyed, both through the food service industry, McDonald's at 10 years, and then getting into a sales career, starting with early stage companies and getting in from the ground up being a salesperson, but then kind of transitioning into management at each of those early stage companies too.
I want to learn more about that, but tell me about your current role now. Tell me a little bit what Clora does, what the value proposition is for the marketplace, and then the scope of your responsibilities there.
Yeah, it's a very interesting company, actually. So essentially what we do is we're a marketplace for the life science industry. So effectively we match people, consultants that have some sort of area of expertise within the biotech industry with companies that are looking for that sort of expertise. So, we're able to effectively match people within a matter of business days. So as opposed to, companies trying to go through their personal networks of people that they know, use, recruiters, and maybe it takes a little bit longer for them to find them. They're able to basically use our marketplace to look for people that have the experience that they need, and turn around to get them started within a matter of business days. It's a great business to be in right now. I mean, we're working with even multiple companies that are working on vaccinations or treatments for the COVID pandemic. So it's been a very interesting time to join a company like this for sure.
And when I hear you say find the people within a matter of days, it leads me to a couple of different things. First of all, I know that you are extremely metrics driven, and I know that came from your experience there, as you alluded to, in management at McDonald's, and just sort of some of the metrics that drive results there, and all the measurables that you were looking for, which is fascinating. But then also before Clora, you were at a company by the name of ezCater, during which you scaled the sales team from roughly 3 people to, I think, 120 or so. And I saw on your LinkedIn profile something to the effect of that you were able to really condense the hiring process down from a matter of days into a single day. First, tell me how your experience at McDonald's sort of informed your management style as it pertains to looking at metrics so carefully and using those as almost an operating principle. And then talk to me about how you use those metrics, if at all, I suppose, to figure out, like, okay, here's what we're missing in terms of the recruitment process, or where the fat is. Here's what we can do to change that, and then this is what we've done to scale it. I know that's a loaded question, but just sort of pick it apart if you can.
Yeah, no, I get a lot of answers. I think with McDonald's specifically, it was interesting. It gave me a very early experience into just the like varying types of experience that you're looking for when you're hiring people. So because I was managing an entire franchise, I wasn't looking for somebody to do one specific job. I was looking for people to do multiple different jobs. And so I think very early on, it kind of helped me be able to identify how to pick people out of a crowd and figure out like what it was that they were going to be good at in order to place them there. Um, so, you know, and it sounds silly to talk about just given the industry that I'm in now, but with a restaurant, I mean, obviously you're looking for specific people who are going to be really good at interfacing with the customers, you know, on the front line. You're looking for people who are going to be working fast paced in the kitchen and be able to produce the food, but maybe they don't want to be customer facing. You need people on the operations side of things. So there were multiple different kind of hats and roles that you look to fill in a restaurant setting like that. And I think it just helped me prepare for then identifying in a tighter type of group like sales, what are going to be those qualifying things that I'm looking for, and how can I quickly identify who are going to be the right people for the right job. Specifically, you know, at ezCater, I think, you know, during the first year, it was kind of a slow growth approach, right? So we were figuring out the right process and business model. We hired, you know, maybe about a handful of people every quarter or so for the first year. And then it was really foot on the pedal second year and third year there. So it gave us a little bit of time to kind of figure out and formalize what our process looked like. I think the thing for me, and you know, maybe it just comes down to that sales mentality of like time kills all deals. I wanted to make sure that we weren't having people come back, you know, multiple times or waiting a long period of time before hearing feedback on their interview. And so it helped us formalize the process of, you know, yes, we're asking them to commit to maybe a couple hours to come on site and meet with multiple people, but we're committing back to them. Hey, we're going to get you an answer right away. You know, sometimes even by the time you go to bed by the end of the night, like you should know, or at least hear from us as far as your candidacy goes. So I think that really helped us as far as the process, just kind of bringing down the timeline that we expected candidates to be waiting to hear from us so that they knew, you know, kind of where they stood and we could make quick decisions on who to bring in.
How much of that was data informed in terms of, or was it anecdotal in terms of the candidate experience and just trying to get them their answers and make decisions quickly? Did you have any
I think it came
data
from
to look at?
personal frustrations to start. You know, I think one of the tough things is like when you're going through the interview process and, you know, obviously on that side of the table, like it's super important for you. You're looking for a job. Sometimes you might be out of a job. And so you don't have a long time to wait. And so I think just out of respect for the candidates, I wanted to ensure that we weren't doing things to delay that part of the process. And I'm sure you deal with this all the time, but the amount of, I guess, feedback that I've heard from people that have interviewed that say they never even hear back at all on whether or not they get a job is just crazy and rude, you know? I mean, I feel bad for people when they're waiting weeks and weeks and, you know, still even unsure if they've gotten the job. So I think a lot of it came from both personal frustration and then hearing other people's experience with interviewing that made me feel like I wanted to change the way that I interview so that at least if they're not the right person for the job I'm hiring them for, you know, they've enjoyed being a part of our hiring process and I might have the opportunity to interview them for something else down the road.
Yeah, that's always great for just company branding and candidate experience, right? With Glassdoor out there and perhaps maybe them referring other candidates to you and so forth. And I've interviewed recently directors of talent acquisition who, you know, I wanted to talk to them about that in terms of peeling back layers of the onion, so to speak, for the candidates to say like what goes on with my candidacy when I don't hear back and those types of things, right? So that's just always interesting. Talk to me about the, you know, going from 3 people to 120 people in just, assuming just like 2 or 3 years in a matter of time for sales in particular. What were some of the hurdles that that you came across that you had to overcome, and then how did you overcome them in continue to iterate your process to make sure that it was as smooth as possible?
Yeah, I mean, the second year, so the first year of our kind of like high growth hiring, it was definitely challenging, right? I mean, we were still very much, it was a 10-year-old company, but it was very startup still. And it's always tough bringing in people to that environment where they see on paper that this is a company that is stable and been around for a while. But we're still going through a lot of growing pains and trying to figure out what our process is, what are we selling and how are we selling it and who are we selling it to. So I think for a lot of the early people that joined there, it was challenging. Like things were always changing. We were constantly, improving things that, maybe didn't go well the first time. So it was a lot of change management. And I think that was tough for sure. So during the second year, I think we really made sure to take a step back. And as we started bringing on these larger groups of people, being very clear and upfront, if we didn't have very set expectations or goals or alignment, but this was kind of something that they needed to be flexible with. Being clear with that expectation, but also trying to make sure that we were putting a process in place ahead of them coming in, so that they weren't just kind of like walking into a fire.
Yeah. So when you say process, specifically, I'm assuming an onboarding process, at least once they get there in terms of, what to do on day 1, day 7, day 30, and those types of things, right? And certain expectations, I guess, that they should be expecting.
Yeah, combination of both onboarding, but in addition to that, also like we probably had 3 different products that came out during my time there. So there was always something new that we were selling. Even after a couple of years there, during the third year, we had something else that we were selling at that point. So it was not only a learning curve for them, but it was sometimes a learning curve for us too. So for sure, the onboarding process was very important and probably the most important, because you want people to have that really good first experience and, not kind of lose that excitement and momentum when they first get hired. But then from there, making sure that they continued to be motivated by the job that they were doing. Even if we were continuously making changes to the way or the prospects or, even the CRM, right?
How often did you have to change the profile of the person that you were targeting to hire and ultimately make offers? Because I'm assuming person number 3 is probably different than the kind of person you need on person number 120. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I think at the beginning it was of course, just the learning phase. We brought some really smart, talented people in. And I think that was the most important thing for me, was hiring people that I knew wanted to be there and wanted to do the job more than what I thought they were capable of, if that makes sense. So, when I'm looking to bring people on, like I'm looking for people that are personally motivated, maybe that ability to adapt and try new things, constantly wanting to just learn and grow and challenge themselves. So I was always looking for people that kind of had that, just that like growth mindset, interested in like learning and trying new things over maybe particular skills, because we weren't quite sure what those skills necessarily were yet. So in the early stages, I think that was probably the most important people for me. Were those people who were going to be eager to learn and try new things.
Tell me about emotional intelligence, because I know that that's something that's important to you as well.
Yeah, it is. I don't know why. It's like, I don't know if it's like this new fad or something, or if it's just old and I'm just new to it. But yeah, over the last few years or so, I started getting very interested in that. I think it's a huge part of sales. And it's funny because my husband was the one that originally got me into sales. And he's been in the automotive industry for like 20 years now, but he's actually trying to transition into like more of a traditional sales career now. And I'm like teaching him about emotional intelligence and, how to manage the way that he feels, or at least the way that he expresses how he feels. So it's kind of been an interesting switch for the two of us for sure, but I'm having fun kind of teaching him.
Can you, speaking of teaching, can you, let's say for instance, if, you're hiring salespeople, onboarding them and obviously coaching and leading them, during the interview process, is there is there a way to screen for that, right? Emotional intelligence, and perhaps maybe if you inherit folks who don't necessarily have the emotional intelligence that's needed, can you coach it into them? Can you teach it? What are your thoughts on those things?
So yes, I do think that you can teach it. And there's a few books that, kind of prove and challenge that too. I think Emotional Intelligence 2.0 is one of them. But I think, I'll ask a lot of those situational types of questions on, if they were in a similar situation that they might face in the job that they're going to be in, how have they handled those things in the past? So I do like to kind of hear stories from them that they've personally been through, and just even their reactions as far as how they felt about it. So I think it's important to understand if there was some sort of situation that occurred, one, how did they handle it? But then even how they expressed to me on how they handled it, right? Because they can say, yeah, I had this really upset customer and, she was a jerk and I couldn't even believe it happened. But I did this about the situation. But if they're expressing that anger and frustration to me, I sometimes have a hard time believing that they handled it in the maybe professional manner that they're saying that they did. So I think the way that they explain the story in an interview is just as important as the way that they said that they handled it.
Do you have any tools that enable that, or do you have any tests or anything like that that they take during the interview process, or it's just sort of a?
So I'm not a big person of upfront testing. I have done the 16 personalities tests, but usually we do that post hiring. So I kind of use that more as a tool to understand how people work and how they'll work with other people. I've really liked using that tool from, just understanding the way that people maybe like to be managed or communication styles. So that's been important for me as far as post-hiring. Pre-hiring, I really have my own kind of like my own built template with questions and things that I'm looking for. So it's not anything that I've purchased or used. It's kind of my own system that I've just built internally, that I've brought with me place to place that I kind of look for. And then as I'm bringing on managers that are then hiring, I, like to teach them the same things that I'm looking for in the templates that I use and the questions that I'm asking, and the different buckets of why I'm asking those questions. Like I'm screening for, this personality trait, or I'm screening for, this and these subset of questions.
How can you motivate certain behaviors in people? How do you? What have you found to be the best way to do that?
So again, I think this is very subjective to the individuals. And I think that even though they're salespeople, they're not always motivated by money. So I think, understanding like really deep down who the people are that are working for you and what individually motivates those people is super important, because you can't treat them and motivate them all the same. I think, the times that I have just put out some sort of spiff or competition and assumed that everybody would want to win, those are the times that I've failed. And I was very surprised, as to why that would fail, right? Like if somebody put $100 bill on the table and said, whoever gets the first person on the line, like I would be that first person. But I had to realize that not everybody was motivated by the same things. I'll give you one example. I had one guy who worked for me. I was managing a team of business development reps, and, I ran one of these spiff competitions, and this one guy on the team, I knew like that he should win this competition. I'm like, there's no way that anyone's going to beat him. He's just so great at getting people on the phone and booking the meeting. And he kind of like sat back that day and didn't even try. And so the end of the day comes, he obviously doesn't win. And I had my one-on-one with him the next day. I'm like, what the heck happened? You clearly could have won that competition. He's like, oh, I didn't care about the $100. I'm like, well, what did you care about? And he just really cared about the recognition. Like if he had won and, someone gave him a pat on the back, or the team kind of like stood up and clapped, he would have been way more motivated than by putting that money on the table. And it would have saved me $100, So I think it's really just about understanding the different ways that people are motivated and make sure that you have something that kind of tailors to each individual rather than some sort of group thing.
What are some of the mistakes that new leaders or managers make when it comes to motivating and leading their team? Do you think that's part of it? Just assuming that they're all motivated the same, and if so, are there others?
I definitely think that is certainly part of it. I think not setting clear expectations. I think coming into a new manager or a individual maybe moving into a manager role, I've seen a lot of people kind of make the mistake as though like, okay, now that I have the hat and I am the leader of this group, you need to respect me and do what I say effectively. And I think that respect is earned. It's not kind of awarded. And I think people need to do things in order to earn that respect with their team. So building that rapport, understanding how people are motivated, not going into one-on-ones, just talking about what numbers did you hit or how many calls did you make, but understanding them, what's important, how's their day going? Maybe they're having a challenge that you can help them with outside of work. I think being a manager and a leader is so much more than just managing their day-to-day expectations. But I've really found that when people enjoy working for me as a person, they enjoy working for me as a leader much more.
Yep, that makes sense. I heard you say once too, as well, is that you can teach people to step on the brake, but you can't teach them the gas.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that you look for when you're interviewing people. If people are very, it comes back to their self-motivation, their curiosity level, understanding how people learn, what was the last thing that they taught themselves. I think people that are interested in that self-growth and career development outside of whatever it is that you might be offering them, those are the people that usually work a lot harder and faster.
What motivates you?
Gosh. I think this is weird. God, this is a really hard one. I'm a very social person, and kind of a people pleaser. So I think just, what's really been kind of fun and motivating for me is just being able to meet so many different people, and not only having an effect on their life and their career, but I get the same in return. So I think that's been the most kind of rewarding thing for me, and what keeps me going every day is, I've worked with a lot of people that end up coming back and either looking for recommendations on where they should go next, or if I have job openings, hey, would love to, kind of follow you where you go in your next role. So I think those are the things that are motivating for me. I kind of like building this tribe that, I feel like I've done something for them. And, I think they also, have done plenty for me as well.
And part of the reason why I asked that is because, again, you alluded in the beginning how, he said, going all the way back to when you were 3 and just sort of what was probably instilled in you then, and then starting at McDonald's at 14 and working your way up through there, and then switching industries and doing really well, and taking a non-traditional path, right? Like you didn't leave high school, go get your degree, and people are always like, oh, how the heck is this possible? And I feel like, one of the best salespeople, and frankly, one of my best friends, he has been extremely driven by the fact that it almost felt like he was the underdog because he didn't necessarily have his degree, and that drove him to succeed. And he eventually ended up getting his degree, just to sort of close the loop, I guess, if you will. But he was always driven in that way, and I feel like, I don't know if you watched The Last Dance recently, but Michael Jordan was cut from his high school team his sophomore year, and even at his Hall of Fame speech, he was still mad at it. Like he was still like, I wanted to prove to my coach that you made a mistake, dude. Like that's what he said, right?
Yeah.
And I just always wonder, if those early experiences, or how people might perceive us, to be a motivating factor as well.
Yeah, I think in the early stages of my career transition, that felt like a hurdle for me, but it was more of a blocker that I was creating for myself. I think what happened in the beginning when I was starting to kind of explore sales as a career, I would see college degree required, or, this many years of experience. And I kind of like took myself out of, the equation. I was like, oh, well, I don't qualify for that. And as soon as I started recognizing that I have way more skills in different areas and different reasons why than other people that might have the degree that they're looking for, I was able to pivot my mindset and be like, I can offer way more value for totally different reasons. And I just need the opportunity to communicate that. So, I think in the beginning, it kind of felt like a potential hurdle. But as soon as I realized internally that I was able to overcome that and that I had plenty of things to offer, I have not had that be a challenge for me throughout the rest of my sales career, which has been good, and knock on wood.
Yeah, there you go. Right. You mentioned a number of different things in terms of emotional intelligence, curiosity, and things that you look for when hiring. As you look at your current team now, you look at the salespeople that you managed at ezCater, and frankly going back to Corian and so forth. Are there particular attributes, traits, skills that you've seen that are that are paramount in some of the best salespeople and sales leaders that you've been able to lead and develop over the years?
So I think I probably look for some of the typical things that people are looking for, just as far as competitiveness, maybe background with sports or some sort of organized group thing. But I think I also look for people who, and this is going to sound weird, but like people who are kind and can play well with others. I think some of the bad sales teams that I've seen or been brought into to kind of fix are the ones that the sales team feels as though like they're the hierarchy at the company, like people need to, respect or do what I say. And they kind of feel like they own things because they're the ones bringing in the revenue. And I think that's a really bad way to run a company. And I think it gives a bad rep, to sales teams in general. The things that I'm looking for are people that are going to be able to get along well with other groups and other teams that they're working with. I think cross-departmental collaboration is very, very important, especially with like the early stage startup companies. Like you rely on people in product and technology and marketing, whatever other department you're working with, you rely on those people to accomplish the goals that you have to accomplish. And so I really try and get away from that stigma of like sales of the boss and, respect that team. And I think it really is the other way around, where we are looking to the other teams in order to help arm and support us to accomplish our goals. So I know that's kind of a long-winded way of saying that I look for people that are going to be kind and, be able to get along with other departments of the company.
How important is communication then as a skill, whether you're a leader or an individual contributor, to make sure that you're fostering that kind of an environment?
Yeah, I mean, I do think it comes down, more on us as leaders than it does on the team, especially for like the early career salespeople. They're looking to us to kind of figure out like what's normal, what should a cadence look like, what should communication and regular, collaboration look like. So, depending on the stage that you're at, I think, there's things that can help, such as like daily stand-ups, and not from a micromanagement perspective, but just from like a communication perspective. And especially with younger sales professionals that need kind of to hear what other people are doing, to get other ideas, those stand-ups are really helpful from that perspective. And then in addition to that, cross-departmental stand-ups help too. So at ezCater, we had one with basically one head person from each of the departments, where we got together a couple times a week, talked about things that were going on in our department that might be relevant to things that they're doing. And then we could take that information from other departments and bring that down to our teams as well. So I think it really all stems from the leadership team to kind of figure out what's the right cadence for communication, and just making sure that the rest of your team, kind of buys into that.
Talk to me about the importance of feedback. I heard you say once, I think it was on one of the other podcasts that I heard you on, you talked about feedback and how it's important that you're receptive as a leader to feedback so that your team would be open to it as well, and how important that is.
For sure. So even today, in all my either one-on-one meetings or sales meetings, I don't leave that meeting until I ask, is there anything I can be doing differently? Is there anything you need help with? What can we be doing to be better? What can I do to better support you? So I do think that's super important. I think, if you're leading from a spot where you're always the one giving the feedback, that's not a good spot to lead from. And they can't look up to you as a leader. They look to you as a boss, right? So I do think, it's a general good life skill to have, is to be able to be receptive to that feedback and know that whatever you're saying maybe not always be the right thing, and that there is always a better way to do something. I am very aware that there are definitely things that I can improve on or things that I could do better at. And I think that's a lot of the reasons that we read books, we, find other avenues for learning things, because there's a lot of things to learn out there. And, I have just as much to learn from the people I hire as they do from me. So.
Yeah, that's a very good leadership style. And certainly, as a recruiter, it would make me feel comfortable knowing that if I'm sending candidates to Colleen Manning, that's the culture, I guess, that they're going into, which is good. I want to go back to metrics just for a second here. You had mentioned that results are nothing but ideas until you decide how to measure them. Tell me, like, what are you thinking there? Like, why is looking at data and looking at the metrics so important when you're running your team? Maybe let's say what you just talked about, right? You're in those meetings, you're giving feedback, and maybe that feedback is founded in the information that you're looking at, and perhaps maybe they're doing it as well. But just tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think you don't know what you don't know until you're looking at the data. And, especially, and I keep coming back to kind of startups because that's the majority of, the time that I've spent. But in those early days, like, you need to scale and grow and iterate quickly. And so I think you need to be constantly looking at, okay, what's working and what's not working, and stop doing the things that aren't working and do more of the things that are working. So, I mean, every single day I'm asking my team, okay, what different emails are you testing? What's the performance of them? Why do you think the open rate or reply rate is better on that one than this one? All right, let's stop doing that one and keep going with this one. So I think every single day I'm trying to instill that mindset of, let's really figure out like what's working best and go do more of that. Somebody said to me recently, I was having a conversation with them about, new business versus repeat business. And for some reason, like, I had all this mentality of like, oh no, new logos, we got to go find new business and, get new customers. And they were like, business is business. Like, if the easier business are those that are already customers of yours, like, why do you care about the new logos? And I was like, wow, I have no idea, and just like that simple sentence really stuck out with me. And so I think you just need to be constantly looking at like what is going to get you where you need to get as quickly as possible, and do more of that. And you can't do that without looking at the data.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, well, I want to get into a feature that I've been using lately called the Rapid Fire 5, which is essentially just 5 questions that I ask because I'm curious. I want to get your answer. I'm sure the audience wants to get your answer, and it's just a nice little fun way to close it out. So,
all right,
ready? All right. What is your favorite sales enablement tool?
Ooh, Outreach.
Okay. One thing that helped you stay productive and focused?
I think, can I take a long answer, or does it have to be like?
Sure. Nope. You can take a long answer, of course.
So for me, I think, like, holistically outside of my life, I need to be focused. So like, I need to get up, I need to have my routine, I need to exercise, I need to have my meals ready. So it's more like being ready outside of my job that helps me be ready and focused for my job.
Yeah, kind of like those rails that keep you focused and on track during what you're doing. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, I get that. That makes sense. You mentioned that people and developing people and those types of things has motivated you. So I'll ask you a different way now, because the question is usually like, so I'll ask you this. What are you motivated? Actually, I'll ask you this. What are you most excited about now, either personally or professionally?
Ooh. Well, since we were just talking about it, I guess I'll go with this. So professionally, I think over the last few months, I've set this 10-year plan for myself that I want to own, some sort of my own company. So I've put in, that milestone for 10 years out. And I feel like the next step for me is kind of building, starting to build my brand with some sort of podcast or blog. So I'm actually really excited about starting to build a potential podcast.
Fantastic. And I'll be happy to help you do that too as well. Books. I know you're a big reader.
Yeah.
Talk to me, give me 3 sales books or leadership books that you've read that you would recommend people.
So I really like Sales Acceleration Formula by Mark Roberge. That's one that I just recommended to my husband, actually, as he's starting to get into this. Coaching salespeople into sales champions is still one I always come back to. And actually, I just started reading this one. It's totally different than anything I've read before, but Women on Top, Lead Like a Boss.
Oh.
So this one was kind of different and just entrepreneur-ish. So I'm excited to finish that one tomorrow.
Cool. Okay. Actually, you know what? Let me ask you one other question before I get into the last one, just because you just brought it up. The it factor in terms of presence in those types of things that I know that and I, again, heard on a podcast that you want to sort of have when you're walking into a meeting, and just the way that, frankly, specifically women should present themselves. Tell me a little bit about that and the role that it's sort of played in how you show up to meetings.
Yeah, that's been definitely very important for me, especially, I think seeing the amount of women that I saw in sales at ezCater, it was actually surprising. We had at least 50% like male to female ratio in the sales org, which is pretty untypical to see. And so it was really a big part of my being there was, wanting to make sure that, one, we were able to attract and bring in more females into the sales organization, and then just help them become better sales professionals. So, in one of the podcasts, I think we were talking about in meetings, like a lot of times, women kind of sit like this or they scooch over. I certainly found myself giving up a chair or maybe sitting on the ledge so somebody else could sit at the table. And I think like we just need to be better about owning our space and being confident that we are there for a reason, or else we wouldn't be there. And so just being able to, speak up more, know and be confident in what it is that you're there to be a part of, and not losing sight of that. I think we have a lot to offer, and we just have to share it more.
And the last question for the rapid fire 5 is, are you hiring? For which positions are you hiring? And if so, how can people get in touch with you? And if not, how can people get in touch with you just to say thank you, follow up with you, seek more advice?
Yeah, so I'm huge on LinkedIn, love LinkedIn. You can absolutely connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm one of those people on LinkedIn where I will get back to you. It frustrates me when, people try and connect with other people that say they're open to, mentorship or whatever. And then they don't, do that. So I promise I will get back to you, and I'm happy to answer any questions that people might have outside of here. We are hiring. Right now I'm looking for business development reps. So, people with 0 to 1, 2 years of experience. I would also be bringing on account executives. So people within 2 to 5 years experience, preferably with like life experience or life science experience or biotech experience. And then in the very near future, we'll be looking to bring on account managers who are looking to manage some of our existing customer base too.
And when you reach out to her, don't forget to mention that you heard her on this podcast.
Yeah.
She gets back to everybody. She gets back to my listeners even faster, right, Colleen?
Absolutely.
There you go. Colleen Manning. Sorry, I truncated your G there. Colleen Manning. Thank you for going over quota today.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Goodbye, everyone.